You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 104th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 455th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, December 13th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion. Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Wednesday at 3:56 p.m. when Mike Miller of the Herald-Times tweeted out the list of players who have won the gold practice jersey so far this year. It's a pretty simple list. Juwan won the first two, then Romeo won it, and the last couple of gold jerseys have been split between those two. There's only one outlier, sandwiched there in the middle, Jerome Hunter. Hunter, you'll recall, won the season's fourth gold jersey and then was promptly announced as being out indefinitely with an ominously described lower leg condition. He has since undergone surgery and remains out indefinitely, with no one that I know holding out much hope that he will play this season. Miller's tweet, as well as comments that Juwan Morgan made on the Earn Your Stripes podcast this week, were strong reminders that Indiana's 2018 recruiting class possessed not just two, but possibly three impact freshmen. Morgan said of Hunter on the podcast, quote, "We really miss him," unquote, and recounted how Hunter was the only recruit who has come in during his recruiting trip and participated in open gyms with the team that Morgan had to go all out to defend. So while Jerome Hunter is unlikely to make an impact on this season's quest for a sixth banner, let's take this opportunity to remember that Indiana is 8-2 and in the top 25 without any contributions from a guy projected to be, at a minimum, among the team's top 7 or 8 players. More importantly, let's remember that when Romeo and Juwan are gone next season, taking all of their gold jerseys with them, Hunter should be ready to play a key role in filling the void they'll leave behind. It's a shame Jerome wasn't able to be part of Indiana's exciting present, but he's a massively important piece of Indiana's bright future. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Bill Musselman of Girls Youth Sports Coaching in Cincinnati. He's the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and he is one of the world's most fun-loving bracketologists.
Well, it's been a fun week, Jerod. Let me tell you, this is fun. This kind of game is fun. This was fun. All right, well, this was fun.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line from the last week in IU basketball?
I mean, the one of us who's really having fun right now is Ryan watching the Chargers get destroyed right now. But that's
my favorite team, the Chiefs. Woo!
San Diego Chicken. Oh, there we go. Anyway, all right. For this is going to be a weird transition onto a more somber note. But you did a banner morning about this earlier in the week. But the unexpected passing of Eric Anderson was sad, and for a lot of people who grew up in kind of the era that you and I became IU basketball fans, he was a pretty prominent name in a lot of those really good teams of the late 80s, early 90s. I thought Chris Williams of IU Artifacts wrote a post on the site this week that did a good job of kind of encapsulating some of his thoughts about him as one of the first players that he really remembers looking up to and kind of idolizing in that way. And I certainly remember watching him play, and his career evolved over his course of time, where he was a more prominent part of the offense early in his career, but still was able to step out and make jump shots, was able to score in the post. Just a good awareness overall as a player. I actually watched a little bit of his senior night game earlier this evening, that one that Galen had put up on YouTube, and kind of made some defensive plays, stepped out and knocked down an 18-foot jumper, and did some good rebounding work in the post. So a player that was a big part of some of the teams that we all really liked growing up, and a guy that I always remember my mom really liking as one of her favorite players as well. So Peggy Bottoms does not impress easy. So let it be known that he was one of her favorites, and certainly rest in peace to him, and our thoughts with his family during a really unexpected and difficult time. None of these, no time is good to hear of an IU, legend player, passing, but certainly when it's as unexpected as this was, it was a, kind of a somber note for the middle of the week in a pretty quiet period for college basketball overall.
Absolutely. Rest in peace. And to my right, he is a columnist for The Big Lead and a co-host for The Hangover, and he is here with us despite his beloved Los Angeles Chargers playing in an important Thursday night game with the Chiefs.
Screw the Chargers. The worst primetime game in history.
He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant this week? Come on, you knew I had something planned there.
Don't you dare say my beloved Los Angeles Chargers. Don't ever. No, we're not. We're fighting right now.
Even kidding. You knew I was kidding.
Gross. San Diego guy. Yeah. Good luck, Chiefs. You're up 14-0 right now. I'm very happy.
I'm going to be hosting the Butler show by myself, aren't I?
Probably, yeah. And I just won't tell you I'm not showing up. I'll just not show up. You can host it. I just think it was good this week. I mean, obviously, we haven't been with you guys since Indiana beat Louisville. I thought that was a really good win for the program. I also think it's just good that they got a week off. They've had so many injuries and so much turmoil as far as that goes, as Jerod mentioned in the opening, with a guy like Jerome Hunter, a guy like Race Thompson missing time with what is apparently a very serious concussion. He's not even practicing right now because of it, and not sitting on the bench during games and all that stuff. Race needs to get healthy, and they need to do whatever they can to get him healthy. If that's sitting him out all year, that's fine. That has to be the number one concern is making it so he's healthy. But I would say that I think it was great for this team to get a week off and just be able to practice, relax a little bit. I'm sure they got some downtime, and then to come back and take on Butler, which is going to be a big game for them for the non-conference schedule. So, and really the last big non-conference game before we get into the Big Ten season. So it was nice that they got this little break right here.
All right, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We will discuss the bracketology impact of Saturday's game against Butler. We will have Ryan's much-anticipated Trayce Jackson-Davis scouting report, and we will give some grades through 10 games in honor of exam week, which we are in right now. And then we'll answer your questions, all of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. But first, let's talk about mattresses, because the presenting sponsor of Assembly Call Radio, Comfort Option, is literally all about mattresses. Comfort Option is based in Indianapolis, run by IU grads and fans, and they have over 65 years of experience in crafting top-quality mattresses. And if you live in or around Indianapolis or Bloomington, you can take advantage of their revolutionary mattress store-to-your-door service. Comfort Option will literally bring the mattress store to your home and custom design a mattress for you right there on the spot based on your preferences. You just have to schedule the appointment. And if you live outside Indy or Bloomington, you can go to comfortoption.com and order their highly reviewed Alpha mattress, which they produce in-house and ship directly to you anywhere in the U.S. with the same satisfaction guarantee that the in-home mattresses come with. So basically, you save a bunch of money by cutting out the middleman.
I mean, those guys do suck,
Yes,
quite frankly.
They do. And here's something else extra special, and pay close attention because the deadline is Friday, as in tomorrow from the time that we are recording this. Comfort Option is giving us 4 of their awesome season tickets to the upcoming Pacers-Hornets game on Sunday, January 20th to use for a contest. So if you want to see Victor and Cody play, all you have to do is order a mattress from Comfort Option between now and Friday, December 14th, and use the promo code ASSEMBLY when you check out, either online if you're ordering the Alpha or in person with the rep who brings the mattress store to your door. Not only will you get $50 off your purchase, but you'll be entered into the drawing for the tickets. And then on December 15th, we'll pick 2 winners, each of whom will get 2 tickets, and then we'll send them to you immediately so you can use them as Christmas gifts. So go to comfortoption.com, order your Alpha mattress, or schedule your in-home mattress store service, and then use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $50 off your purchase and be entered into the drawing for the Pacers-Hornets tickets.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk real quick here, fellas, and Andy, we'll kick this over to you to begin. Big game this weekend against Butler. Obviously, the Crossroads Classic, always a big game. But it seems like it's especially important from a bracketology perspective for Indiana. The Hoosiers, already have some nice wins, 4 top 50 Ken Palm wins, as we've talked about. They do not have a win away from home in non-conference play yet. So how important is it, Andy, that Indiana get this win on Saturday if we start projecting forward for NCAA tournament purposes? You're muted. You're still muted.
All right. Sorry. Anyway. I was feverishly researching the latest net ratings, so just allowed myself to get immersed in those. And
you don't have to lie to them, Andy.
So I think with the Louisville and Marquette games under their belt, I won't say it minimizes the importance, but it certainly lessens it a little bit. That was one of the things we talked about coming into this 4-game stretch that they're currently sitting at 3-0 in. But it is always good to be able to prove to the committee that you can win away from home in the non-conference, because I think if we've seen anything from the Big Ten thus far, I think conference road wins are going to be tough to come by as it is. And I think where Butler, I think they're around 40th, I want to say, in the net right now, which would, neutral court games 1 through 50 end up being a quad 1 win. So I find it pretty unlikely that they would, drop out of that. So, it'd give you, at least at this point, 3 quad 1 wins in the non-conference, which is pretty good. Obviously, these numbers are pretty fluid and can change. But I think to be able to prove that you can win away from home, I do think the performance at Arkansas will help. They did play well away. Well, I don't know if we would all look back on that game and say they played well, but they played, a close game against a, Power 5 team on the road. So I think that's, still important, even though they lost that game. But it would certainly help, because the last 2 non-conference games aren't really going to do anything. They'll probably fit in the that quad 4 group with the UT Arlington, UC Davis, Montana State, Chicago State games, and so really last chance to get a marquee win for the better part of really 3 weeks, I guess, if you think about it. By the time that game gets over, and then those 2 games, the long layoff, and then you get back into Big Ten play.
Ryan, how do you look at the impact of this Butler game, just kind of on a more general basis?
I think it's just another opportunity for this team to grow and prove itself. And whether that, you get a big RP, or what is it, net rating benefit from this, or it impresses the committee, I don't think that's as important as this team just having an opportunity to get better and go against another team in the state, prove its supremacy, try and establish that this is a program on the rise, and this is a program that's going to take out the competition around it. And I think that that's the message that has to be sent. I think it's less important for the committee and all that stuff. That stuff I feel like will work itself out, especially now that they've got the Louisville win, they've got the Marquette win, they've got, they've won 2 conference games already before January. There's just some momentum there that I think that they're going to be fine when it comes to the tournament. Yeah, when you get down to the nitty gritty, and I know that's Andy's thing. He's a bracketologist, and that's is super important for him. But as a from a non-bracketology perspective, I think that the importance here is to validate the Louisville win, to say, like, yeah, we won close at Louisville, and we were at home. Let's go do it at a neutral site, and let's go beat a team that's in our backyard, and prove that that was a real win against Louisville and a solid win. And let's go take Butler out now too. And I think that's the most important part for me, is to see them kind of lay claim to the territory. And then when they get Purdue later, they'll do it again too, and just kind of show, hey, we are the marquee program in Indiana. We're the best team in Indiana. Let's take these guys out.
Yeah. And of course, after the Butler game on Saturday, we will have you covered with the post-game show. Join us at assemblycall.com as soon as that game ends. Andy, anything else on the Butler game coming up?
I think it'll be interesting. One of the things that you do, like it or not, you kind of get yourself into the position where you're rooting for the teams that you played in the non-conference. I think the Marquette win has looked better as they've beaten, Kansas State and Wisconsin. I think, the Big East looks pretty wide open. So I would say really, regardless of whatever happens, if Butler can really assert itself as one of the top teams in the Big East, which is possible, it's kind of a poor man's Big Ten in some ways, where there's a lot of teams in the middle that are pretty, maybe not quite as good as the Big Ten teams that are in the middle of that league, but a lot of evenly matched teams where if somebody can really emerge, so for IU fans, it's probably a case where it certainly wouldn't hurt to root for, the Butlers and the Marquettes to really, climb toward the top of that league, because it makes those games look better in the Marquette case as a win already. And in the Butler case, depending upon what happens. So just something else to watch, another, piece of that, and something that as IU looks to get back to the NCAA tournament, something that we can pay a little bit more attention to maybe this year than we did last.
Yep. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, it is time for our long-awaited Trayce Jackson-Davis scouting report. Ryan has the tape. He will fill us in on what we can expect from the latest in-state 5-star prospect to sign with Indiana. That is next. Stick with us. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts,
Chat mobbers,
or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel. You'll be privy to all of the between segment banner that might not make it into the radio show or podcast edit, like when Andy explained this really odd idea for our Assembly Call Christmas gifts this year.
Let's talk about where we can get those Tom Crean, George versus all y'all shirts.
Join us live at assemblycall.com and youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morris, here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And Ryan, it is that time. We had a big commitment, and every time we have a big commitment, we go to you for the scouting report to kind of find out what this player is all about. Trayce Jackson-Davis, a guy that Archie Miller and his staff have prioritized heavily. I mean, after Romeo Langford, he's probably the guy that they have prioritized the most. He and Keon Brooks, another 5-star in-state player. So let's talk about Trayce, a guy who has really risen up the chart since his sophomore year. What is Indiana getting in Trayce Jackson-Davis? What's kind of your before we dig into the nitty-gritty, just kind of your overview of what you expect from him?
Well, I think that he's a guy who, it's interesting because he's just a center right now. He's listed as a center, probably play more of that power forward thing, but he's not like a stretch 4. He's a guy who can play with the ball in his hands, but he's not a shooter yet. And if he wants, he's at 6'8.5", 232 is what he's listed at. And at that size, he's really going to, if he wants to go to the next level, he's really going to have to develop, an outside shot, an outside game. I think he handles the ball really well already, and I think he's a pretty darn good passer already. But he's going to have to really take that jump shot to the next level. He's a lefty, which it's often hard for lefties to develop jumpers for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just a thing. You don't have a ton of great shooting left-handed players for some reason. I don't know why. And also their shots look weird, so ugh.
Al Durham takes offense to this. So does Brian Evans.
And Al has done a very nice job working on his jumper. But what I love about Trayce Jackson-Davis, and obviously his dad is Dale Davis, his biological father is Dale Davis, the former Indiana Pacer. But despite like his lineage, he was on the B team in middle school. He was not a starter, and he was not on the top team. This is a kid who had to work to get really good. He had a growth spurt as a freshman and really began to work really hard and develop himself, but he still didn't have any scholarship offers. And for a guy who was ranked 16th nationally on the 24/7 composite to not have a single scholarship offer as a freshman in high school, that's insane with as much basketball as these guys play. So that really is impressive that he has developed himself individually into this really good player. What I see on film when I watch him is he's mostly a post player who has moved out gradually as he's gotten older. And so he's really trying to become one of those modern forwards who can kind of, who is a back to the basket guy. Now he's starting to become more of a face up guy. Now he's a guy who can handle the ball at the top of the key. He's also really a lot stronger. If you watch film from his junior year and his senior year, he is really bulked up. He's got really broad shoulders. He's really started to clearly dedicate himself in the weight room to getting better and stronger. And he's also, as a result of that, is finishing through contact a lot better than he did last year. Last year, a lot of times he'd go up, get contact, and just kind of fall away. Now he's going up and finishing through it. He has good touch around the rim, but his thing is he loves to dunk. This guy will dunk on anybody. He's not a super athlete, guy where he's just a pure athlete and doesn't know how to do things. He's a good athlete, but he is really, really skilled, and that's what's impressive so far from what I've seen. Good rebounder, but needs to be more aggressive when going up. I think being 6'9" and playing at Center Grove, he just can let rebounds kind of fall to him, and that's not going to happen in the Big Ten, so he needs to be more aggressive with that. Really nice release on his shot. He's actually a really good free throw shooter, which I know it will make a lot of Indiana fans happy. At the line, he has a really consistent motion. It's really soft. He doesn't hit from distance yet, but I feel like that's the next step in his evolution. Again, really good ball handler, great passer for his size. He'll hit guys on back cuts and no look stuff all the time. And he's just really smart with the ball, sees the floor well, has great vision. He can also run the break off of rebounds as part of that ball handling. And I think that that'll be great for Indiana because they want to get out and score in transition. He's a guy who can rebound the ball, put the ball on the floor, bring it up, and make the right pass or decision with the ball. Really nice footwork around the rim. He's pretty quick for his size. He also, as part of that ball handling, he can drive from the perimeter, spin moves, whatever. He gets into the lane, puts himself in good positions and finishes at the rim. He also blocks a lot of shots. And I think a lot of that is based on timing too. Because remember, he's 6'8.5", 6'9". He's not some hulking huge center who just stands back there and swats. He's got really good timing on blocking shots. So yeah, I really just like his all-around game. I think for his size and the position he plays, he moves very well for his age. And I think that, again, the only piece missing offensively for him is that jump shot. And hopefully that's what he spends, the next couple months working on before he gets on campus. Also, clearly a guy who's dedicated to the weight room. I think he's really going to take it to the next level when he gets on IU's campus and gets in the weight program.
Can I tell you who I started thinking about as you were describing him a little bit? It sounded to me a little bit like a slightly taller, not quite as good shooting Juwan Morgan a little bit.
There's some of that in his game, sure.
And I never really thought that watching him play, but some of the way that you described him, those are some of Juwan's skills and some of the things he had to get better at when he got here.
Yeah, he's a little more well-rounded offensively than Juwan was as far as his ball handling and things like that. And the guy that I compared him to, and I know you guys know I hate player comps, but just watching him, this kind of jumped off the screen, was DJ White as a high schooler. And DJ wasn't as good a ball handler. He was also a little bigger and a little more brutish in the post, but it's the ability to step out on the perimeter, the ability to face up, the ability to pass, and then his size too. He's got that really long body but he's also big. It's not a guy who is either super skinny or super bulky. He's kind of has it all. And but the way he moves and stuff reminds me a lot of DJ White when he entered IU as a freshman. And if you look at their ratings as players and sort of their size and all that stuff, the comparisons are already there.
Interesting.
So because I remember I was at IU when DJ came on campus, and I remember just thinking about his game and seeing him play and stuff, and it's very similar.
There were a few people in the chat also who mentioned Jared Jeffries as a possible comp. Now, what's interesting is when Jeffries came in as a recruit, he was billed more as kind of an inside-outside guy, but his shot didn't really materialize in college like it was expected to, and he became much more of a guy who operated out of the post, was a great passer, terrific rebounder. I mean, he was an excellent player, probably underrated for how much he did.
Yes.
But that I hear some of that too in the way that you're describing him. Maybe it's stronger than Jerod.
There is some crossover there. I would say that Jeffries was always more of a string bean, though. I mean, he got pushed off the block a lot. I mean, he was great on the post because of his length, not because of his base or his size. And Trayce has him beat there. I think Trayce is he's already a really strong player, and I think again it's going to get even better when he starts working with Cliff Marshall this offseason and gets into that program. And
Jeffries was just such a smart player too.
Yeah, and there is some crossover there, sure. Again, this is why I hate player comps, because it's never 1-to-1. There are similar aspects of their games. So yeah, but I mean, from what I can see, it's a great get for Indiana. He's just a very well-rounded guy, and they throw on the fact that he's in their backyard. It makes it even better.
Jeffries did shoot 38% from three his sophomore year. That was better than I remembered.
Yeah, I'd say that's better than I remembered as well. So, talked a lot about Ben Ladden wrote a good piece on Inside the Hall earlier this week about kind of how IU plays through Morgan in the post and things like that. So I was kind of getting around to this a little bit in the way that, what Jerod brought up. I mean, is he a guy that you think you can eventually play through inside? Is he good enough passer? I think it's hard with some of these guys at this point in their career to really know, because they don't often have to pass, just given that they're more talented. Is he a guy who could develop into that kind of, a guy you play through?
I certainly think so. I mean, if you watch it at high school, a lot of times he's at the top of the key and they play through him there and as a passer. And I think he'll be a fine passer. I don't know how well he passes out of double teams in the post and things like that, because you just don't get to see as much of that in the video that we get, because it's a lot of AAU stuff where guys are one-on-one. In high school, I'm sure he's getting double teamed. I don't know. I haven't seen a whole lot of stuff from this year in high school, and a lot of the high school game video is pretty poor. So it's kind of hard to see the angles on the floor and everything. But he is a good passer, and he's good with the ball in his hands. And I think that that's the comparison there with Juwan, is that Juwan just is really good at seeing the floor, and really has been since he was a freshman. That's not something that really developed. It's just something that was always there, and we see more because he has the ball in his hands more. But Trayce definitely has good vision and is able to see the floor. And he's a guy who certainly is a willing passer. He's not a guy who is a black hole on the post when you send it to him. He will move the ball and again, and handle it well and take himself out of trouble if there's trouble. He'll dribble himself out of trouble and then pass the ball. So again, very well-rounded, very mature game for a young guy. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that he had to make himself better because, again, he was on the B team in middle school. He was not a star from day one. He's really had to develop himself. And that's something that I love about him because he's a guy who knows the value of that hard work.
I value middle school B teamers. Those are good people. I was a middle school B teamer. I worked my way up though. His future. There aren't many people who project him as a one and done.
I don't think
he's certainly now. I'm sure if he gets the opportunity, he'll go as he should. But sure. Listening to guys like Sam Vecini and others, he's not really on that radar. Does he possibly even project as a 3 or 4 year guy simply because the NBA is kind of moving away? Kind of like we're seeing with Juwan. It's Juwan is such a lot of the things that he does well at the college level, he won't even have the opportunity to do at the NBA level. So do you think Trayce could be a 2 and out guy, or could he project even longer just because of what he brings to the table and what the NBA currently values?
Well, it's really going to depend on how well he plays. I mean, it's a hard question to answer. I don't see people projecting him as a 1 year guy, as a one and done guy. And the reason why is because, if he were 7 feet or 6'11", maybe you do. And as versatile as he is, maybe you do see that. But as a 6'9" guy, he's going to have to play on the perimeter, and he's going to have to, not exclusively, but he's going to have to play on the perimeter a lot, and he's going to have to develop his game as a shooter. And just in the NBA this day, if you're 6'9" and you can't shoot a 3, you're kind of a tough fit for, because you're not going to play center. You're going to play pure center. I do think a guy like Juwan, is a guy who fits the modern NBA. And the reason why is because of versatility. Now, he's not shooting as well or as much as we thought he would, I think, but he does have that versatility to step on the perimeter, handle the ball, rebound, defend, all that stuff. And I think that's why he actually fits the modern NBA. Now, if you look at a guy like Jerome Davis, that's a guy who's an odd fit for the NBA these days because he's a traditional back to the basket post guy. Trayce isn't that. And he's a guy who I think started as a sophomore as that, and has moved out and developed sort of a more well-rounded game. So I think that, this is a guy who projects as at least a 2 year guy. I'm not going to say he's on any kind of plan, but I don't.
Good job. He clearly tried to bait you into that. So
I know.
Kudos to you
I don't see him as
falling into his trap.
I don't see him as a one and done because just physically the matchup. Now, look, if he turns into a 40% 3-point shooter over the summer, then we can have that discussion because that changes the game completely on his position. But if he is this guy, maybe a little better, slightly better next year, I think NBA teams would tell him, hey, go back and work on your long range game because you need to be able to do that at the next level.
I was not baiting him. It was a legitimate question.
It kind of reminds me of of a guy like Trey Lyles, who was bigger and shot threes better, and he went in, and what happened to him? He kind of got buried, and he's been traded around. I mean, but that guy, we watched him in high school, and we're like, this dude is a one and done. He's unbelievable. Well, the game kind of leaves you behind if you don't establish yourself really quickly in the NBA. The game will leave you behind. And so I think Trayce having, I'm sure he's got connections to the NBA through his dad and all that stuff. I think that, he'll know what a smart move would be and whether or not it's the right move. And so, I would not expect him to be a one and done. I think Keon Brooks is far more likely to be a one and done if you look at the way he plays.
Well, and speaking of Keon Brooks, hopefully we get to do a Keon Brooks scouting report here sometime in the next few months after he makes his decision. So nice work, Ryan. Thank you for that fine scouting report. All right, coming up, since it is finals week for the team, we figured we would treat it like a midterm for the season. So we're going to go through the roster and hand out some grades based on each player's performance through 10 games. Should be fun. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips. Remember that if you are a serious IU Hoops fan, you need to be subscribed to our free IU basketball email newsletter, especially now that the season has started, is well underway, and we're sending out our in-depth post-game analysis emails the morning after every game.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
And joining is easy. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com.
Make no excuses.
Can we get some basketball, please?
All right, let's get back to talking basketball, gentlemen. So it is final exam week for the team. I thought it would be fun to do some midterm grades. You know, we're about a fourth of the way. If you're really thinking about good things in March and April, we're about a fourth of the way through the season right now. So let's hand out some grades. And I've assigned us each a player. Take 30, 45 seconds, explain your grade. If the other two people have a rebuttal, anything like that, we can hop in. But if not, we can move on because obviously we've got a lot of players to go through. So let's start with Romeo Langford. Andy, your grade for Romeo.
Boy, that's tough.
Yeah. Well, we did talk about to set the ground rules, and feel free to use this against the time for Romeo because there's probably not a ton to talk about. That we're grading these based on expectations. So
yes, based on expectations.
So keep that in mind. So Romeo, I would say you look at the stats, played 83% of available minutes. A really high free throw rate, got into the line well, drawing tons of fouls. As he did in the Louisville game, shooting well from two. I'm going to say A-. The main reason for that is just the 3-point shooting hasn't really come around yet. The free throw shooting I think has, but I think he's been probably a little bit better defensively than people would have expected. And there's certainly games that he's really shouldered the offensive load and kept him in games when he needed to. So not perfect by any stretch, but I think he's been pretty much as advertised. Coming in, and he makes a few improvements from a shooting perspective, then probably gets up to the A that most people would expect him to get.
Yep. Brian, I assume you agree there.
Yeah, I mean he's in the A range, I think for sure. But yeah, the 3-point percentage is really the only negative at 23%. So
yep,
really needs to up that. But other than that, I mean he's been as advertised, I think, for the most part.
Yep. All right, Juwan Morgan. I will take Juwan. I'm going to go with a B+ for Juwan. And look, he's been terrific. His 2-point shooting is awesome. He's been a terrific rebounder. I mean, he almost single-handedly won, games against UT Arlington and UC Davis when Indiana was really struggling. The reason why it's a B+ and not an A, again, this is against expectations, is because he's kind of led the charge for the poor free throw shooting. And in Indiana's 2 losses, he got in early foul trouble in the first half, and that really hurt. And I think it's fair to expect a little bit more from him. And since we've only had 10 games, in 2 of those, in the 2 biggest spots, he wasn't there in the first half when his team really needed him. So I fully expect him to be in the A range later, but I actually feel it would do him a disservice to give him that full of a grade when he's had those 2 performances. So I give him a B+. It's a strong B+. I think he's been terrific, but I can't quite shake those out of my head right now. But fortunately, he has plenty of time to make up for them. Next up is, I'm assuming, you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Ryan, here's kind of a tricky one for you. Justin Smith.
C- for Justin Smith, and it's not lower because I think the last 2 games have shown improvement. 22.3 minutes per game, 8.4 points, 4.1 rebounds. Does not look good. He's only shooting 49.2% from the field for a guy who doesn't venture, doesn't really need to score outside the 3-point line. Shooting 61.8% from the free throw line. But I will say the last 2 games, I think that Justin really looked better on defensively specifically. He rebounded well. And then we started to see the offense come around against Louisville. Where he's going to make his money is in the post and on back cuts and things of that nature. When he can really get into the lane and do some stuff, I have confidence in him. I don't have confidence in him stepping out on the floor. Based on expectations, I think everybody expected him to be that third option and be a guy who could step out and make some shots and do some things from the perimeter this year. That's not there right now. And so we need to sort of dial back those expectations a little bit, but we have seen improvement from him. I think if you were asking me this 2 weeks ago, it'd be much harsher, but I'm giving him a C- right now with an arrow pointed upward because I think that as he starts to find his role with these guys, I think that it will improve.
I'd probably go C or C+, but I don't really have too much to quibble with there. That's a pretty fair assessment.
Yeah, I would agree. I would have said C or C+. I think when you think about that's basically average. And if you look at, he's had some games like the Louisville game where you'd say he outperformed that. He's had some other games where he really struggled and kind of averages itself out right there in the middle.
Andy, Devontae Green.
Oh boy. This one's difficult because I think the injury is a part of it. And so from an expectation standpoint, like he's not really even playing the role right now that he was expected to. But I would probably put him if Justin Smith's a C-. I think Devontae's probably in the same category there with, again, has had some solid moments since he's been back. The hit those couple big threes against Penn State, has had some other, real struggles in that, like the second half of Penn State. So I would put him in that category. I think he certainly hasn't, and part of this is a credit to Rob Finney. I think Devontae has ended up playing a different role. And so it's almost hard to grade him against expectations that now probably are no longer, things in some ways out of his control really shifted that. But I'd say probably, C- or C for him as well.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to take Rob Finney next. Look, I think if you're not grading on a curve, he's probably a B or a B plus because he's been a really solid point guard, but he's, disappeared at times, hasn't been willing to take shots at times. But if we're grading this on expectations, for him as a freshman to come in and step into the role that he has, to be as consistent defensively as he has, to be as solid just from a ball security standpoint on a team that's really struggled with turnovers, and the bonus is, just how timely his shots have been. To me, he's got to be an A. Based on expectations, because I don't think we really knew exactly what to expect. We thought he would be solid, but no one thought he would be this solid. So I'm giving Rob a solid A, and I think obviously he can build on that, and moving forward, the expectations will get bigger, but he's an A based on the expectations we had coming into the season.
I think I'm with you on that.
Okay. Ryan, here, this will be a fun one. Jerome Davis.
I know this is kind of a cop-out, but I'm going with an incomplete on Jerod Davis, and the reason why is because he's only playing 11 minutes a game. Now, if you had to have me grade him,
which is the purpose of this exercise.
Well, I think it's an incomplete because we haven't seen him consistently that much yet. But if you go by just like the last 2 or 3 games, and you want me to do that, if you're calling the whole season, I think it's an incomplete because he hasn't really shown a track record yet. But if we're going by just the last like 2 or 3 games, I think it's a B. It's a solid B. The problem is he's only playing 12 minutes a game, and that's against I didn't expect him to even be back this year. So the fact that he's playing 12 minutes a game is great. But if you're expecting getting the full Jerod Davis experience, you're really not.
Well, see, that's why I would give him a B or a B plus because I wasn't even expecting much from him, and he's been a key player in some really important spots.
In some key games, he has been, but the problem is then he missed the game because of he hurt his leg again, and
doctor's excused absence, so he doesn't.
Absolutely. So, but that's my thing is it's been so up and down, it's been so disjointed and uneven until the last like 3 games, and so. I am impressed with what he's done this year in the limited time, but at the same time, he's shooting 66.7% from the field. That's fantastic. But I also think that we're not really there where we can fully judge what we're getting from him yet. I think in another month, maybe we will be. So it's hard for me to judge him solidly based on what we've seen so far, just because we haven't seen a lot. But I would say, if you are putting a gun to my head and saying you have to give him a grade, I'd go a solid B, B plus.
Okay. I think we're all in agreement there, other than taking the cop out of an incomplete.
Well, I just think we're not there yet. Dang it. We're not.
Ryan, let the record show that Jerod did pick a push for multiple Big Ten when we did Big Ten over-unders. So, I can give you a hard time about it. I'm just not sure that.
Dang it, this segment was my idea too. Okay, Andy, Al Durham.
I would probably put him in the. I'm tempted to say A-. I think we didn't really know a lot about what his role was going to be, and again, part of that has been the injury to Zach McRoberts has opened the door for him to get some additional playing time. But I think he's been able to do a little bit of everything. He's been a solid 3-point shooter, 12 of 28 so far on the season, shooting 77% from the free throw line, which is about as good as anybody on the team at this point. And I think he's been able to do a lot of different things. He was able to play really well defensively. Thinking back to that Marquette game. So again, I think against expectations, I'd probably put him in the B plus A- range, just because I think they've been able to get more out of him than people thought. And he was a guy that we had a lot of questions about coming into the season of how much is he really going to play. And he seems to have carved out a spot for himself in the starting lineup. And I don't know that he's going to relinquish that anytime in the near term.
Yeah, he's been solid. His really bad game against Arkansas, and his struggles in the first half of the Duke game, kind of prevent him from being a solid A, or to me, even that kind of puts him in the B plus category. But he's still been
that's fair.
He's been really good,
and it's hard to blame him for both of those games because he was in a position that he shouldn't have had to be in because of the injuries. So, like ball handling, like handling the ball as much as he was and things like that. That's not what he does well. So it's hard to. But that's I mean, those performances happened, but it's just hard to blame him exclusively for it.
By the way, great profile of him at The Athletic by Dustin DePirac. If you haven't had a chance to read it, it's really good. Okay, so that's Al. I've got Evan Fitzner next.
San Diego guy.
I would give Evan Fitzner a C. I think he's had some games where the shot has really come around, and there's certainly some matchups that he can take advantage of, but he's also disappeared in some games. And I think we're really learning that unlike Max Bielfeldt, the guy he was most often compared to, who could contribute in any kind of matchup, Evan's not that kind of guy. So I think he's still going to be able to come in. I think he'll win a game or two for Indiana in Big Ten play because he'll hit some big shots, but I don't think he's going to be the consistent part of the rotation that we thought. And so I give him a C because he's been about average based on, I think, what the expectations were coming in.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he's hit 45% of his 3-point shots, but those have been fewer and further between over the last couple of games. So if he comes in and he's not hitting threes for you, what else is he adding? Is he adding? He's really got to hit his shot.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's become clear he's just very matchup dependent upon when he can really play well, and I think it becomes hard to carve out consistent minutes when you're a guy who's kind of identified that way, and two, really to do substantially more than maybe what was expected of you coming in.
Yeah, see, I'm seeing some D's in the chat. I can't give him a D because he was brought in for shooting, and he's given us some shooting. He's given us that, but it's just the inconsistencies and some of the other issues that have come up. Ryan, Zach McRoberts,
who is another guy.
If you want to go incomplete,
you could, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give Zach a C, and the reason why is because I think he's played great defense, which we expected. I think he's been solid
okay defense.
Yeah, solid. Not he's not an all Big Ten defensive player.
He's just not up to his own standard.
Yeah, but I will say the negative part. So solid defense would be like a B to me. But the negative part has been he's played 95 minutes. He's only played 6 games, but he's played 95 minutes. He shot the ball 5 times. We were told all offseason he was going to let it go this year when he was open. He's 3 of 4 from 3, shooting 75%. But he's only shot 4 times. Like, Zach, you got to let it go, buddy. I get it. You're a ball mover. You're a guy who gets people involved, and you move the ball around the perimeter and all that stuff, and you do all the right things, blah, 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 blah. But when you're open, you got to shoot it. You got to shoot it. Yeah. And he still hasn't broken that streak. But he's been solid. So I give him a C. I think that he is reliable defensively for the most part, unless he's just completely out. He's beyond himself with athleticism when he's facing somebody. But he's a guy who needs to open up and shoot more, especially if a guy like Fitzner isn't going to be coming in and lighting it up off the bench. If you're going to be playing, you're a guy who was starting at the beginning of the year, you got to open up and shoot the ball. And he's shown he can do it. He's 3 of 4 on the season, but he just is too tentative, and I think that needs to change.
His effective field goal percentage is 100%. So
that's pretty good.
What do you want from him? Jeez.
All right, let's hit these next 2 quickly. Andy, Demizi Anderson for you.
I'm gonna say a C. I feel like we're giving that a lot, but for me, expectations were he wasn't going to play very much. He's ended up having to really log much bigger minutes than anybody thought. But I think you've seen from him kind of what you would have expected: a guy who can shoot, not afraid to shoot, but really struggles by his own admission on the defensive end, and really just kind of getting into the flow of what's going on from a college perspective. So I'd say C, but you could almost argue even higher than that, just because I don't think anybody, including him, probably expected him to play the minutes that he's played thus far.
Yeah, I'm going to go C, maybe C plus for Clifton Moore, simply because he's kind of been what we expected, hasn't really earned time on the court. Did have a few flashes against Penn State, but still also showed us a lot of the reasons why he hasn't gotten on the court. So if you want to be really charitable with those 7 minutes and give him the C plus, I'm fine with that, but I would probably go C or C minus simply because he hasn't been able to take that next step. All right, last one, Ryan. The coach, Archie Miller. What grade would you give him?
I got him with an A minus, and I think that if we had told you guys at the beginning of the year we were going to be 8-2 heading into the Butler game, everybody would have been thrilled with that. You knew you were going to lose at Duke, and then you look at the loss at Arkansas by 1 point in a game they should have won and kind of got screwed in. I'd take 8-2 anytime. You throw in the recruiting victories, getting Trayce Jackson-Davis, you throw in dealing with the injuries and everything they've dealt with. And I think that this has been a really good showing from Archie Miller this year. There are things to nitpick in rotations and maybe some timeout calls, whatever. This team is playing where it should be playing and playing better than that. And they've won some road games. They won the road game against Penn State. They won their. They only won that road game, but they played tight with Arkansas on the road, and they beat a team in Louisville who looks pretty good. So I've been impressed so far. They beat Marquette as well. That was a huge win early in the season. So I would say that an A- for Archie. There's room to improve, but you got to be encouraged with what's going on with this program.
Andy, you down with that?
Yep, I think that's fair.
All righty.
I felt like we had an amazing conversation on all levels.
And he gets some extra credit for, landing another 5-star, which is always nice.
Always
nice. All right, coming up in our final segment, we answer your questions, including how Butler has been able to stay so consistently good and what exactly the rules are for redshirting in college basketball. That's next. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call. We are wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we always reserve the final segment of Assembly Call Radio to answer your questions. We've got some good ones, so let's hop right into them. Andy, JD asks, how does a program like Butler stay so consistently good despite several coaching changes over the last 10 to 20 years and a move to a better conference in that time as well? How have they kept it going?
I think this will sound cliche, and I think it probably does to people when they say it, but that whole Butler way concept and that, I mean, that's really something that they've bought into. They've, kept guys in, brought guys in to coach that have had exposure to the program, the guys that came before them. So from a continuity perspective, even though it's a different guy sitting in the seat, I think it's, a lot of the same concept systems and principles that they play with. They really haven't changed a lot of the kinds of guys that they've recruited with and had success recruiting. They've got some transfers that they think fit well into what they're going to do. And I think on that note, I think the Duke transfer, I think Jordan Tucker, I believe he's going to make his debut on Saturday. So I'm interested to see how they utilize him. But they've done a little bit of that where they've been able to, kind of pick some guys off here and there on the transfer market. But I just think it's largely been continuity of the system. And again, people will probably say it sounds hokey with the Butler way, but I think that really does mean a lot to that program.
Yeah. Continuity makes a big difference in sports.
They've also developed a name brand for themselves now.
Yes.
I think. And that run to the Final Four back-to-back years was huge probably for recruiting because you've got kids sitting at home that were watching that and associate Butler the way they associated for years Gonzaga as being sort of, well, they're not in the top tier of teams, but I'm not in the top tier player. I could maybe make it there, and they're going to be consistently good. So I really think that they've really developed that brand regardless of who the coach has been. And they've been competitive. So that brand has sort of developed itself as well.
Yep. Ryan, we got this question from Scott. Can we get more insight into the redshirting rules or parameters? Example, what if Race is out further? Can you redshirt more than one season? Regarding Race and Jerome, when is the latest you can make that call in the season? And in particular, let's clear up the difference between college basketball and college football, where in college football you can now play in up to 4 games. That's not the case in college basketball.
No, in college basketball, you can't play 1 minute of competition. You do that, you're burned your redshirt. It's gone.
So Race has already played 4 minutes, so his... Technically,
and he redshirted last year. Once you redshirt once, you cannot redshirt again. Too, you don't have unlimited redshirt. So when you get on a college campus, you have 5 years to play 4. That's what they say. Is you can take 1 redshirt year and then have 4 years of eligibility. So you've got 4 years of eligibility, but you can only be on campus for 5 years. Is sort of the way that it plays out. So a regular redshirt, you don't have to declare it at any point. At the end of the season, if you haven't played at all, you just say, okay, that's the season. We're not going to count towards eligibility. And you're now a redshirt freshman going into the next year. So you haven't used up your eligibility. You just kind of say it at the end, at the end of the season. You don't have to declare it or anything. With a medical redshirt, if you play up to 20% of the season, you have to play less than 20% of the season, I think it is. And then if you get injured and miss the rest of the season, you can apply for a medical redshirt. You don't automatically get it. You have to apply, and they have to determine whether or not you're eligible for it, basically. And a medical redshirt acts as a redshirt. It's the same as just not playing that year. So you do not lose a year of eligibility. Now, if you have already redshirted, a guy like Race would be an example of that. You cannot get a medical redshirt. What you can do, though, like let's say Race, who played 4 minutes this year, does not play again this year. At the end of his 4 years of eligibility, so when he's a senior, so this will count as a year of eligibility for Race no matter what. When he becomes a senior, after his senior year, he can apply to the NCAA for an extra year of eligibility because he only played 4 minutes this year. And again, it's not easy to get that, but they do occasionally give additional years of eligibility in certain circumstances. Now, the fact that he only played 4 minutes probably bodes well for him if he wants to do that and play a sixth year. But they're very rare for us to have a sixth year senior. So basically, you get one red shirt. You can apply for another one at the end of your career, basically. And sometimes they do give those.
All right, let's one more question here, Andy. I'll send this to you. This is from Mark. It says, now that we're 30% through the season, it would seem that several things that we hoped would give us a higher ceiling are not happening. And his question is, has our ceiling been substantially lowered? You know, for example, depth. We've had the injuries. The improved free throw shooting hasn't really happened. You know, we haven't gotten the major leaps from Justin and Devontae, as Ryan mentioned earlier. Zach being an offensive threat hasn't really happened. So when you take all those things into account, do you think that the ceiling has been substantially lowered, or you're not ready to say that yet, only 10 games into the season?
I don't think I'm ready to say that yet, because I think for as much as, you know, some of the things that he lists out here are true, I think you've also had some unexpected positives. I think the defense is better than you would have thought. I think contributions from Al and Rob Finney have been more than you thought you would get. And Duran's been, you know, you've gotten more out of him than you thought you would by this point in the season. So I think there's some other things that help to offset those a little bit. And I think because of the injuries, it's a little bit hard still to really figure out like what this team is going to look like when it's all together. There's still a chance that other guys, you know, come back. You know, we talk about Race and that kind of thing. So I think we're starting to see the rotation solidify a little bit now. If it gets to be a little bit more solidified, then it's there. But I still think if you think top four finish the Big Ten, I think that's still possible.
Yep. All righty. Well, that will do it for us on this week's episode of The Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording.
Chat mobbers.
And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. Join us Saturday after the IU Butler game for the postgame show. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you. Screw the Chargers.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.